Hey, welcome back guys, this is Keelan, and in today's video we're going to be doing a little bit of character modeling and trying to reproduce some aspects of my poolside character here. So if that sounds like fun, as always, start up Blender and let's jump on into the video. Alright, we're back in Blender guys, and I hope you're all keeping well as always. Today we're going to kick this off with the character head, and as usual I do like to take the starting cube and transform it into something pretty as often as I can. So this is actually going to be the head of our character today. So to start, let's scale this down a little bit. So select your starting cube, then press S just to scale this down. I do this because if I'm not mistaken, these grids are 1 meter generally in the real world sort of scale, and your head isn't 1 meter wide. Well, most people's isn't anyway. So I like to bring mine down to around about here. Plus I find it easier to work with smaller numbers when it comes to lighting a bit later. So something like that will do for me. And then from there, let's jump into the modifiers. In our modifiers, and add a subdivision surface modifier. This is just going to begin to round this shape for us, but we don't want a perfect ball shape, do we? So let's tab into edit mode, press Ctrl R to enable the loop cut tool, come near the center point, left click to insert that, right click to leave it perfectly centered. And now this is going to begin to give us a bit more of an oval shape. But back in object mode, I'm going to press S and Z just to give this a bit of height too. Something like that. And remember, this is just my preference, for my characters, my style, however you want to sort of finish up your characters and make them look, it's completely up to you. But from there, I like to have a viewport preview of 2, but in the final render, this is going to be 3. Then we can right click shade smooth, and there's the basis of our head. Now let's add a nose. So Shift A, add a cube, scale it down with S, then let's use GY to bring this forward, and I'm going to initially thin this out, and I think I'll bring this back a bit too. So tab it into edit mode, let's press 2 to select edges. I'm going to select this top edge, and then GY to bring this back, something like that. And now let's add a subdivision surface modifier again. And also back in edit mode, let's press Ctrl R, add in another loop cut, and just bring this down here maybe to give us a little bit more geometry. Increase my viewport preview, increase that one to 3, right click shade smooth, and there's a nice pointy nose. And all we need to do at this point is inside view here, I'm going to move this into place and perhaps scale it on the on the Z axis with S and Z here to give it a bit more height. But this is just me tinkering now. In terms of how you want your character to look, that is completely up to you. I think I want to bring this in slightly, actually. It's a little bit too pointy for my liking. But so let's press 2 to select edges. I'm just going to bring this one in a little bit, and then perhaps the top one too, something like that. Almost just like you're working with clay or something, and just increasing the scale in little areas depending on your preference. But there's a nose. That'll do for the nose for now. Now let's make the mouth. So with the nose selected, let's do Shift S, cursor to selected. So the 3D cursor is now at this point. We can do Shift A, go into curves, and I'm going to add a circle. Now a quick note, if you don't have the circle or all these extra curves, you can actually go to Edit, Preferences, and inside add-ons, search for extra and enable extra curves and extra meshes, because you may or may not have some of the things that I'm going to be using. So just enable those and you shouldn't have any issues. Awesome. Cool. So as I said, Shift A, into curve, and we're going to add a circle. A little bit of a different style of mouth today, and that is an awfully big circle. So let's use S to scale this down, GY to bring this forward, and then press RX90 to spin that 90 degrees there. And initially, let's scale this down a bit more, and we're going to come into, what was it, data properties, Turn off my path animation, we don't need that. Into geometry, and here we have it, the beveling option. We just want to increase the depth here, and I'm also going to hold shift while I do this, which is going to make it a bit slower, something like that. And then tab into edit mode on this, and a circle essentially consists of 4 vertexes, and all I'm going to do is select this top one, press G and then Z to lock it to the Z axis, bring this down, and then take the bottom one, G and Z to bring this up to give us this basic mouth shape. It's very big, so I'm going to scale this down even further, jump to my right side view, move this into place, something like that, and there we have a character mouth, nice and stylized, looking good. Now let's add in an eye, shift right click to move this here, and then shift A, we're going to go for another cube, scaling this down because he's awfully large once again, S and Z to bring this up on the Z axis, add in another subdivision surface modifier. You're going to get so fed up with me saying that, but that's essentially what we're doing here. We're using subsurface modeling to create these nice smooth stylized characters. But let's increase my viewport to 2, render to 3, tab into edit mode, and I just want one loop cut around the middle section here. So Control R, left click, right click, and perhaps fatten this out slightly. And then in top view, I'm just going to move this eye into place, right click, shade smooth, something like that. Looks pretty cool. I'm digging it, but of course we do need 2 eyes. So with our eye selected, into our modifiers, we can actually add a mirror modifier to make our life easier. Then inside the mirror modifier, the mirror object is going to be a head, just like that. Coolio. And typical good practice is to make sure your mirror modifier is above everything else. Otherwise, you can have some interesting results. And what are we missing now? I think we need some eyebrows, and then we'll touch on the hair too. So for the eyebrows, let's just move the 3D cursor to the eye. So I'm going to select the eye, Shift S, cursor to selected, then do Shift A. We're going to add in a cube again, S to scale this right down, GZ to bring this up. And then let's extrude this out a little bit. So tab into edit mode, press 3 to select faces. I want to select this side, whilst holding shift, select this side. And I'm just going to extrude both of these out at the same time. So hold alt, press E, and we're going to do extrude faces along normals. And now if we move our mouse up, just keep going, and about there will do. Click, like that. And now we just want to add that little bit of curvature. And to do that, we're going to be using the proportional editing tool. So click up here. Then I'm going to press, well, actually, no, I'm going to hold Alt and select this edge here, which is going to select this full loop of faces. And in front view, if we press G and Z, and right now we can't see anything happening, but if we scroll the mouse wheel in, we can see we have this interesting circle of radius. What is going on here? This is essentially the proportional editing tool taking effect, which adds a little bit of a fall off to the action you're doing. So in this case, I'm moving the eyebrow up, but the proportional editing tool is applying that effect to the rest of the shape in a bit of a lessened form, allowing us to create little curves like this. And then with this bit still selected, I'm going to do the same on the top. I'm going to press G and Y instead to do it forward. And now we just need to curve this around with the good old subdivision surface modifier. Just like that. Increase my viewport to 2, render to 3, right click shade smooth. And now let's just move this into place. So I'm going to select it, G to move, into top view, G to move, and then R to rotate this slightly, until we get a nice bit of positioning that we like. I'm also going to scale this up a little bit too, actually. Something like that. Whoop, just come off the eye, put that back in there. And also we're going to mirror this across with the mirror modifier. Something like that. Now we have a nice happy chappy face. You can tinker with that as much as you like, but now let's move on to doing the hair. So, along with the hair, we're also actually going to need some ears, otherwise he's not going to be able to hear a thing, is he? So, let's start by moving the 3D cursor back to the center of the world. So let's do Shift S, cursor to world origin. And initially, I'm going to add some ears in here. So let's do Shift A and add in a cube. S to scale this down. And then G and X to bring this out to the side. And then I think I'm going to use S and Y to thin it out just a little bit. And then using another subdivision surface modifier inside of modifiers, let's start to round this over. Cool. I'm also going to just use S to increase the scale here. And then let's go ahead and start adding a bit of extra detail. So I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to press 3 to select faces. I'm going to select this face and just press I to inset. Something like that. Then E to extrude this inwards. And then I to inset one more time. And now we've got this almost like a bowl shape because I'm going for this sort of stylized character approach. So feel free to add as much or as little detail as you like. But as we've done previously, let's increase the viewport preview to 2 and the render to 3. Right click shade smooth, something like that. Now in front view, let's just press G to move this into place and then scale it as you require. And we're also going to need another mirror modifier here to go ahead and mirror this across. And then I don't know where their accent came from. And now, now we've got some nice ears on this character. So all that's left to do is to add some hair. Now, in regards to the hair, I've used a variety of different techniques. I think for this one, I used some sculpting tools just to add a couple of, cool, spikes and stuff. So I'll try to see if I can remember how I did it exactly. But before I do, I think I'm out of coffee, guys. Okay, and we're back. I've got my coffee. Feeling good. And by the way, this is decaf. I wouldn't want you guys thinking I'm running around full of caffeine all day. I like my coffee in the morning. And then if I have one throughout the day, it's typically decaf. So, don't get too much caffeine. It's not good for you. Even though I am an advocate for coffee, I do like coffee. I don't want you guys drinking too much of it. But back onto the topic of discussion, which was hair. So to do this today, what I'm going to do is press Shift A and just add in another cube. Whoop, scaling this down. Then GZ to bring this up to the hair region. And let's add in a modifier. And of course, it's going to be the subdivision surface modifier. But a little different today. I'm going to increase this to 3 in both of them. And then in the drop down, click apply. And when you apply a modifier, it takes effect. It's no longer just sitting there waiting for you to do something with it. Now this is what we call generate destructive transformations, because if I tab into edit mode, it's now actual geometry. We can go in and edit this thing. But all I'm going to do is in object mode is S and Z to scale this down, S to make it a bit wider in general, GZ to bring this down to here, into the general head area, and we're going to go into the drop down here and jump on over into sculpt mode. Now, if this is your first time using the sculpting tools, don't worry, we're not going to be using much of these really. The only thing I generally use is the grab tool. So you can select this here or press G, and then using F, we can change the size of the brush that we want to use. And I'm also going to enable X-axis mirroring first here. And essentially what we can do is with the grab tool, you can just click around and grab different parts of this mesh and begin to move them around. Something like that. And all I'm looking to do here is to create a general hair shape that I like. So I'm going to start around the sides just to bring this here. And then I'm going to turn off my X-axis mirroring to do some styling. So imagine you've got some hair gel in your hand or some wax, and we're playing with somebody's hair. So let's flatten it all out initially, just neaten him up. And by the way, if you may or may not know how to control your camera very well, but I'm just middle clicking my mouse wheel here to let me rotate this character pretty quickly. I'm no pro sculptor by any means. This is, you know, I keep all my characters quite minimal. So this just gives me the ability to create some nice curves, you know, some nice little styles to mix it up from time to time and try different techniques with, you know, my sort of creations. But I think for the purposes of this tutorial, something like that will do the trick. What do we think? Look okay? Good, bad? Let me know what you think. And actually, if you've made it this far, leave a comment below and tell me, Keel, I made some hair, bro. It looks cool. Thanks. But from there, back in the drop down here and into object mode. Coolio, something like that. And we do have a lot of jagged edges, so perhaps it's worth us adding one more subdivision here. But, you know, depending on your computer, this may or may not start slowing your computer down now. So you could keep your viewport preview at 0, and then perhaps keep your render at 1, right click shade smooth, and I'm happy to work with that for now. I think that looks pretty cool, and that's a nice character face if I do say so myself. Now let's just parent all this to the head. So highlight everything, shift click on the head, Control P, set parent to object, keep transform. And now if I double tap R on my head, we can take a look around, and our character can hear, he can see and gaze upon this new blank world in which he resides. Hello, farewell, Zola, whatever the song is. From there, we press Alt R to reset your rotation. And as long as I don't keep rambling and trying to sing in the middle of my YouTube video, we could probably move on to creating the body. So let's do a quick transition into the body. So this is the part that can get quite difficult for people, because in the old tutorial back like 10 months ago when I first created that, you know, character tutorial, which blew up by the way pretty well. I don't know why, because that was probably one of my least favorite videos, and I'm I'm like, why are you guys watching this? It's not good. So what I tend to do is start with some basic vertexes, and we're going to be taking advantage of the skin modifier to build out a general humanoid shape first. So to start, let's do Shift A into meshes and add a single vert. And just like I said earlier, if you don't have the single vert option, guys, you do need to go to Edit, Preferences, into Add-ons and search for Extra. And it's probably inside extra meshes. So enable these, you're gonna need them, I promise you, one day. But with that enabled, Shift A, Mesh, Single Vert, add Single Vert. Now you can see it up here, we've got the vertex in here, and it's just a tiny dot in the center of our world. From there, let's go into modifiers, and I said we're gonna use the skin modifier, which, as you can tell, is applying some mesh to our vertex. And right now it's awfully large and very square. So on top of that, let's go in and add a subdivision surface modifier. That's going to begin rounding this, this cube. And what we can do, you do need to make sure that you are in vertex select mode, not face, not edges, but vertex select mode. And then just grab this middle one and press E, and you can start extruding this out in different directions. In this case, I'm just going to press Z to start bringing this down towards the shoulders, but it's really fat, I know. So what we can do is actually just highlight all of this, Control A, and start bringing this down to start. Oh, and I still have this proportional editing tool off. We can turn that off for now. And now that we've extruded this out once, if we tab into object mode, back into edit mode, we don't have those black vertices all over the place, which is going to make this much easier to see. So from here, let's go on into X-ray view. And now you can see we've got one dot here, and we have another dot here. So now let's start using this method to build out a bit of a shape. So from here, we're going to want a shoulder, right? So I'm going to select this, press E and X start bringing this over here towards the shoulder. And as I said before, we want to do half as much work as often as we can. So in our modifiers, I did a mirror modifier, and it's very important that you bring this above the others so we have a nice smooth mesh here. If I turn off X-ray, you can see it's looking nice and smooth, and we can see this character beginning to be built out here. But now let's progress. So I'm going to turn on X-ray because I find it easier to see the vertexes this way. But with this selected, let's press E and X to extrude out perhaps the upper arms, and then E and X to the forearms, round about there. And then we'll do some hands, but we're going to come back for hands. Right now, let's just do the general shape of the body, and then we'll finish up those extra little bits. So, selecting this middle one, easy to bring this down towards the belly, easy to bring this down towards the hips, something like that. And as we're going along, if you want, you can increase the scale of this by pressing Control A, and making this bigger or smaller. And for the hips, let's press E and X. And now E and Z for legs. Control A to scale these down. E and X again. Control A to scale them down. And you can see we're building out this general humanoid shape. And this is how I start with everything. Eventually, you probably want to get to the point where you just save a template, which you then, just copy and paste to work with your other characters. But if you're starting fresh, this is generally how I would do it. Okay, cool. So now let's begin to shape up the neck a bit more up here. So back into edit mode. I want an extra vertex here. So I want to subdivide this edge. So I'm going to press 2, click, right click, subdivide, back into vertex select mode, and then just Control A to thin this out a bit maybe. And we could probably bring this down a bit too. Something like that. Cool, that's coming along well. And I do realize this part is probably quite confusing. It's quite an odd way to build out a character. It's just one method that I sort of discovered and I enjoyed using. But of course, by all means, if you have other ways that you like to create your character models, feel free to do so. This is just how I like to do them. Okay, but I think that'll do for the general shape of the body. Now we need to do the hands and the feet. So to try and keep this video as short as I can, I'm going to do the hands and then I'll fast forward and let you try to do the feet yourself using the sort of same technique. So to do the hands then, let's tab back into edit mode, into X-ray so I can see what's going on. And initially I want to move this. You can probably see this dashed circle we have going on here. This is the root of the skin modifier. I'm not, if I'm honest with you guys, I'm not vastly sure what this does, but I generally try to keep it at the center of mass of my character. So I'm going to select the base sort of hip region vertex here, and inside my skin modifier, let's just mark this as root, just like that. And now coming into our hand, quick tip, if you hold Alt and middle click, you can change the perspective of where the camera is focused. So Alt middle click here, and we're going to transform this bit into a hand. And in order to do this, what we can do is press E and X to extrude this out a little bit more. Now imagine we're moving into the palm of the hand, and I'm going to mark this as loose. This essentially means we're telling the skin modifier, don't add too much extra geometry to this, because I'm about to branch this out into multiple fingers or branches or whatever it is you're looking to create. From there, let's select this, and I'm going to press E to extrude once towards here, which is going to be a thumb, and then we want 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is going to be our fingers. And initially, of course, the shape is going to be all messed up, but that's because the scale on the skin right now is far too large. So back into X-ray, I'm just going to highlight all of these digits, Control A to bring it down, and before you know it, we've got a nice smooth shape. And then let's select these 4, press E to extrude these out, just like that. Would you look at that? We've got a hand coming along, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just selecting the vertexes here and pressing G to move them out, spread out those fingers. And then we also need a thumb, so I'm going to select this one, E to extrude this out. And just like that, we have a nice, chunky, stylized hand, looking pretty cool, if I do say so myself. What do you think of that? How do you like them apples? His hands are very large, aren't they? If you want, don't forget, you can come in, select all of this, Control A, shrink these down. You can also select the fingertips, double tap G to move these in, and play around with your scales until you get something you like. But I like it. I think that's looking pretty good. Now, I'm going to fast forward the feet, but, you know, feel free to slow it down. Sometimes I do like to throw in a bit of a curveball, a bit of a challenge. So you do the feet yourself, and or feel free to slow down this footage and watch me do it. And I think that will do for the foot. So I realize it does look fat, guys, and strange, I know. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the sculpting tools once again to add in those extra little bits of definition where generally, you know, as humans, we're a bit more curvy. Do you know what I mean? We're not flat like this. You know, we want this to look a little bit more realistic and just nice to look at. But what I like to do as well, I realize that we've got quite just the one face here. It's always good, really, when you're making these characters to have a nice single line all the way down. And to sort this, I'm just going to tab back into edit mode here, turn on X-ray once again. And this sort of hip vertex, I'm going to press G to move this up. And then when you get to a point where you go far enough from the center, it will split off into two to give you this nice center line. I'm going to leave that like that, and then come back into turn off X-ray there, and then back into object mode. And even though we do have these sort of curvy hips, we're going to adjust that using the sculpting tools. It's just good to make sure you do have a nice center line on your character. And before we progress, let's make some backups, because it's always good practice, because once you apply all of these modifiers, there's no going back, unless you just so happen to be able to undo. But, you know, after you've done so many things, you can't go back. So let's just select the body here, Shift D to duplicate, right click to leave in place, and then press M, new collection. And I'm going to call this backups in big old capital letters. Click OK, and then just untick this to disable it. And now you've got that in there should you ever need it. Now we can go ahead and safely apply these from top to bottom. So you want to apply the mirror, apply the skin, and then lastly apply the subdivision. Now if you tab into edit mode, this is now actual geometry that we can play with. And what we're going to do is in the drop down, jump into sculpt, and now we're going to use this grab tool once again to start shaping this up and making our guy look a bit more manly. So for starters, we need to trim down those hips, dude. You're not that wide. Oh, and before I forget, turn on this X-axis mirroring. So make him a little bit slimmer in the waist. Perhaps bring the groin area down. At this point, it's just preference, really. You know, just because you're following my tutorial does not mean you need to create my character, guys. So perhaps I'll make him a bit wider in the body. And from the sides, bring that belly in a little bit. God, if only if it was that easy, right? You know, let's slim down, guys. Woo! And then bring the chest out slightly to make him a bit more bulky. And don't forget, you can press F to shrink the size on this tool, because I think I've brought him out a bit farther. I'm going to undo that, shrink down my tool with F, and then just bring out the chest a bit more. and then bring out the back and his rear end, and then also inside view. Let's bring his lower back in slightly, something like that maybe, just to make him a little bit more human shaped, like he's got a bit of meat on him. You know, he's had a couple of veggie burgers, and he's filling out nicely. You know, there we go. Maybe something like that. Oh wait, and the feet too. So I'm gonna move to the feet. Oh, quick tip: if you do want to jump your focal point around, like I've been doing, if you hold Alt and middle mouse click, then you can jump the focus point just like that. Cool. And I just want to flatten this off. So in my side view, let's press F to increase the scale on this. And I just want to flatten out this foot a little bit and perhaps exaggerate that heel a bit more. Something like that. Cool. And I think that will do. So we can go up here now, back into object mode, and let's add a subdivision surface modifier again, and right click shade smooth. And would you look at that? I think that's not a bad base mesh for our character. And as I said before, if you are having a hard time with all these polygons and perhaps it's slowing your computer down, just keep your viewport preview at 0 look, and by the time you come to render, this will be nice and smooth. But in the viewport, you know, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to keep it on 1 so everything looks nice and smooth and it's easy for you to see the general look and style that I'm looking to achieve. So what does our character need now? I think it's clothing, right? I want to put some summery shorts on this guy to make him ready to hit the pool. So let's do that now. So, but in terms of making clothing, my process hasn't really changed a whole lot. I tend to duplicate a section of the mesh and then we're going to repurpose that for a piece of clothing. So let's tab into edit mode on this, pressing 3 so we are in face select mode, and you do want to be in X-ray view, so when we select a piece of the mesh like this, we're getting the front and the back. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to click and hold. I'm going to grab down to about there, or maybe do I want a bit more? No, just that bit like that. And then Shift D to duplicate, right click to leave in place, P, separate the selection, and then back into object mode. And we can see now we have this new body 002, which is the shorts. So let's double click and rename this to shorts. Turn off X-ray, and right now it's just sitting inside the character mesh, so we need to go in here. I'm going to use the solidify modifier and bring in the solidify above the subdivision because it has brought the subdivision modifier along with it when I duplicated it from the body. And let's just start by then perhaps increasing the offset just so it's sitting on top, something like that. And I think I'm going to want to flatten this out. So let's tab into edit mode on the shorts, press 2 to select edges, and then whilst holding Alt, I'm just going to select this for loop, SZ0 to flatten that out, something like that. I think that's looking pretty good actually, and that's turned out really well. But if you need to, don't forget you can always tab into edit mode and move these things around and scale this in different areas depending on what you need. But I think something like that will do the trick. All I want to do at this point is inside my solidify modifier, I'm going to enable only rim, and that just means the solidify modifier isn't going to create a bunch of geometry inside the shape. It's only going to do it on the outside. That way you don't get all this internal geometry in the shorts that essentially we're not going to see, so there's no point having it there and slowing down your computer. But this is just like my sort of preference. Cool, and I think that'll do for the shorts. If I'm honest with you, they're looking good. He's looking stylish and ready to hit the pool. So let's now just bring some color into his life. So in order to start adding color then, let's go ahead and jump on over into Material Preview. And this is where we can start adding some color. And in terms, so if you go into the drop down here, you've got a couple of lighting options to play with to start. I tend to use this one. I think it's called, yeah, Courtyard. So I like this for the two-tone effect. But remember, this isn't what your render is going to actually look like in the final. That's going to be in your rendered tab. So there'll be another video where we'll go into rendering and stuff. But for now, we're just going to stick to the material preview, do some coloring, and finish this guy up. So to start then, let's go ahead and select the body. And inside the materials properties tab down here, let's click new, and I'm just going to call this material base. And materials wise, I suppose, you know, this is, in the end, this is a 3D virtual world, so your character can be any color in the, you know, this color wheel is completely up to you. But I'm going to go for like a cartoony pinky skin color, maybe something like that. Cool. And I want to use the same color on the head. So if I click on the head, and now in the same tab, in the drop down, I can put base in here, and same again for the ears. And I think I'm going to put the nose as a new material to call this nose, because I like my nose to be a little bit of an off color, because, you know, I think it just gives them that cool cartoony sort of appearance. And then the lips, let's make these perhaps like a red color, something for a bit much, something like that maybe. And then for the hair is gonna need its own color. I think in the design I made like a brown haired sort of color, so perhaps something like that. And of course I want the same color for the eyebrows. And then we need the eyes, so I'm gonna make the eyes pretty much black. And down here you've got a whole bunch of options you can tinker with, but if you're new to Blender, generally I'd probably just play with the roughness with your art to start off, and then as you learn more you can start tinkering with like metallic and all these sort of things. So 0.25 I think I'm gonna go with. I like that beady-eyed sort of toy look. I think that looks pretty cool. And the shorts, I want to make some cool stripy shorts to make them a little bit different. So what we're going to do, we're going to use some nodes for this. And if you don't know what nodes are, don't worry. I'll explain it as best as I can. But essentially, what we're going to do now is jump on over into the shading tab. And you zoom in if it's quite far out. We're going to go ahead and click on our shorts. And down here, let's click new. And I'm going to call this material shorts. And we're gonna, this is the node editor down here, so make sure you have use nodes enabled if you can't see anything. And so this is the color of our shorts right here, but we're gonna use some additional nodes to go ahead and create a cool stripy pattern. So to start in here, let's press Shift A, search, and I'm gonna use a wave texture. Then we can plug this into our base color, and you can see what this looks like. So from here, if you want, you can play with the variables, you can play with the scale, and I want some nice thick stripes, but I want them to be going vertical. So in order to change that, we're going to use some more nodes. I'm going to press Shift A, and we're going to use a mapping node, plug this into the vector of the wave texture, and on top of that, we're going to use a texture coordinate node. We're just going to take the generated, plug this into the vector, like that. And now what we can do is actually adjust these rotation variables to get our desired appearance. And in this case, guys, I'm just going for some like stripy shorts. So I'm just going to make this 90 degrees, nice and vertical. And then you can play, whoop, that was huge. And then you can play around with the general scale to get a look that you want. I'm going to go for something like that. And then one more thing is going to be color. So Shift A, and I'm going to look for a color ramp. Click, and then just click in between to plug those into there. And now if I click on any one of these color tabs, I can adjust the color and make these any color I like. I can't remember what color I went for in the original design. It was like an orangey and a yellow color. Let's try this out. Something like that. And I don't want this faded look, so in linear, let's change this to constant, and you'll just have to drag this tab up to create some nice straight lines like that. Do you know what? That's turning out much cooler than I anticipated. Wow. Look at this guy, captain of the sports swimming team. I love it. But to finish this up then, let's go ahead and just highlight all of the character. And then use G and Z. We're going to bring him up to the X line of the world on the base of his feet here. So that way, if you decide to go on now to perhaps complete my rigging tutorial, you're in a good position to do so. And just like that, guys, we come to the end of another tutorial. But before you go, I just wanted to jump in and give a big thank you for hitting that subscribe button. I can't believe that we're over 20,000 subscribers now, which absolutely blows my mind. There's over 20,000 of you that like to listen to me talk absolute nonsense while trying to make a tutorial. But if you did enjoy, likes and subs are very much appreciated as always, and if you would be interested in the source files for these tutorials, feel free to head on over to my Patreon where you can download those. But other than that, my name has been Keelan. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.